Hi, Michael. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you
Thanks for
doing
having
today?
me.
Welcome to One Humanity Community podcast. In this podcast, we feature the stories of nature lover, ecologist, environmentalist, farmers, climate change activists, advocates, ecopreneurs. Ecopreneur means ecological entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, and above all, change makers. I would like to have a chat with you. Mostly it would be informal chat, I would say. So, how would you like to introduce yourself for our audience, Michael?
Let's see. I'm a plantsman. I work with perennials mostly, focus on uncommon fruits. By uncommon, I mean easy to grow, tasty, and attractive, sort of what I call edible landscape all-stars, which are not your usual characters that most folks start out with. When you get into fruit growing, people think about their favorite fruits in the stores, the red delicious apples, the peaches, and in our mid-Atlantic area, they are rather challenging. But there's lots of other fruits that are easy to grow, and these are the ones I like to focus on. Things like the pawpaws and the elderberries and the juneberries and the jujubes, things that are delicious and very easy to grow. So I always try to encourage people to start with what's going to grow well, so that you're encouraged to do more. Whereas if you start with something challenging and it fails, you think, oh, I don't have a green thumb, I can't grow things. And the green thumb is a myth. If you can use a computer, you can grow food. It's a matter of focusing, right? It's like, what do you put your attention on? And the same thing with growing. It's just getting your timing right and ideally choosing the best species. I also work a lot with nut trees. I'm very big. I have a nonprofit, maybe we'll talk about, focused on nut trees specifically. So I can get into that maybe when we talk on that subject. But yeah, I just love plants. I love plants, and then I love designing, plants to different landscapes. So when I look at landscapes, they automatically sort of read the landscape. It just happens to me everywhere I go, where I start to see what sort of plants would go well based on water, wind, sun, all of these elements. So design and plants. That's where I'm at.
When I read about you and you made me nostalgic. Your work in Nicaragua and the design you did and so many other work. And I was just wondering some of your videos about pawpaw plant. I don't know much about pawpaw, even though I'm also a plant guy like you. I sell plant and also, sometimes give for free some plants. I have a little plant business sort of thing. So, yeah, please tell me more about pawpaw plant.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I lived in the tropics for almost 20 years of my life, throughout Latin America mostly. And a good 12 years I lived in rural Nicaragua. So all tropical growing systems. So did the same thing there. Work with fruits, nuts, palms, bamboos, all these edible and useful plants, typically always focusing on perennial species. It's a big focus for me for many reasons, which we can talk about. But the pawpaw is very unique in the sense that it is the only member of the custard apple family, which is all tropical and subtropical. It's the only member of that family that migrated north over thousands, hundreds of thousands of years into modern day, North America, as far as southern Ontario, pretty much into zone USDA zone 5 and 6, all the way down. Now it stops in around zone 9, around northern Florida. So it doesn't go tropical anymore. It's a very interesting species. And it is a delicious fruit, especially when you get the good genetics. So I'm big on genetics and fruits and nuts and plants in general, because it makes all the difference. If you're going to take the time, the effort, and give valuable space to planting something, ideally you have the best genetics to get what you're hoping to get from that plant. So the pawpaw is a good example. There are good wild pawpaws out there and people find them, but there's also a lot of pawpaws, wild pawpaws, that aren't worth eating and are not the best experience. So if you're going to plant a pawpaw, get the best genetics. And there's been some really good work done on selecting pawpaws, probably ever since humans interacted with them, but certainly in the last 100 or so years, there's been a lot of focus to get the really good genetics and cultivars or select seedlings of pawpaws. And when you are having one of these select cultivars of pawpaws, you're eating one of the best fruits on the planet. The pawpaw has a custard-like consistency to it with tropical flavor notes of banana and mango, pineapple, citrus. I mean, it's exquisite. I've traveled the planet tasting fruits all over. I'm a real fruit explorer, and I consider the pawpaw to be one of the best fruits I've ever tried anywhere on the planet. And it grows here in the north, so it's a tropical plant that grows in the north. Beautiful big lobed green leaves, landscape, edible landscape, specimen, certainly all star, has very little problems, issues with disease and insects. It's gorgeous. The deer don't eat it. Big bonus, big
Mm.
bonus. It's medicinal. The leaves and the twigs are having a lot of research done for their medicinal properties. I can't say enough about it. I wrote a book on it. One of my books is on pawpaws, for love of pawpaws. We have a pawpaw festival. I have over 100 pawpaw trees here at our permaculture site. Probably 30 different types of cultivars. So, I don't know what more to say about it. Of all the things I grow, it certainly stands pretty tall.
Yep, you convinced me to plant pawpaw. Every winter, I have a list of the plant, and
Mm.
I talk to my wife and my children, and where can I plant? I have bamboo, I have English laurel, skip laurel, all kind of thing which I use for selling purpose. I will find a little somewhere, little corner where I can.
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah. Well, I'll tell you a trick with the pawpaws. Ideally, you plant them in full sun. This
Mm,
is, where people often, get misled by hearing that it's a shade, growing plant. Came up from the north, so it's highly adaptive. It'll grow obviously in the dense shade. It will not fruit in the dense shade of the forest. It needs sunlight to give some fruit, and then full sun gives you full fruit. And we're talking on a tree with good genetics, 40, 50 pounds of fruit per tree in the sun if it's well mulched and is out of the wind. So if you have a small space, like it sounds like you do, you can plant two pawpaw trees, 1 foot apart and
mm,
have them grow up. And they'll grow up and they'll work it out and they'll seem almost like one tree, but they'll be able to cross pollinate. And that's key. You do need at least two for cross pollination. But if you have a limited space, you can plant two 1 foot apart. I've actually done that and it's worked wonderfully. So, and try to get as much sun as you can and then mulch it deep and wide. They like
mm.
consistent moisture, but they need good drainage. Don't put them in a wet spot. Another misnomer things. People think, oh, they grow down by the stream. They grow on the stream banks and they grow in the areas of the floodplain that drain. They will not grow in a wet soil. You have a very wet soil, grow elderberries, and American persimmon, and mulberries.
Mm. In fact, I have very, very limited space, Michael. Couple of years ago, my wife and I started looking for little land in Frederick County and some other areas.
Mhm.
We didn't find, unfortunately, but this dream is still alive. And please tell me a little bit about Project Bona Fide. This is really cool. When I was reading about Project Bona Fide, I thought about we in Nepal, especially in the context of Nepal, we need more Michael.
Yeah, so Project Bona Fide's a nonprofit I started in Nicaragua. So I'd spent many years before that living with indigenous peoples throughout Latin America, working in rural communities, and just learning lots of skills and just learning propagation and working with tropical species and just realizing the challenges of hunger and lack of food security and just a lot of the basic, life need challenges that you find. And so I had sort of a large drive to try and help um, create food security in the long term, and then also create market niches based on those perennial foods. So Project Bonafide started in rural Nicaragua on a remote island within Lake Nicaragua, so a twin volcanic island called Isla Ometepe. Absolutely magical place on the planet. Very, very removed from the mainstream of life. I did this all on my own. I wasn't part of any projects, or people always say, "Are you part of Peace Corps?" And I'm like, no, this is just me.
Mm.
And so I showed up there with the vision and of creating these food forests. And I began by collecting diversity from around the tropical belt of the world. So a good example are mangoes, right? So in permaculture, we observe what's doing well somewhere. We don't go in necessarily with a bunch of ideas about what we're going to plant, or is it native or not native. We go in there and we say what's doing well. And mangoes were doing really well, but they only had one type of mango, and it was dropping these little stringy fruits in 1 month of the year. So I'm like, all right, well, I know there's lots of different types of mangoes that'll produce at different times of the years. So went around the tropical belt, went throughout Central America, Hawaii, southern Florida, Thailand, Southeast Asia, wherever these mangoes were growing, and started collecting the grafting wood, the cultivars, grafted them onto the local stock. And then we started creating, number one, food security, because then you started having mangoes producing almost every month of the year. Right. And then you had a market niche because you could start selling mangoes when nobody else had mangoes. So
Mm.
that kind of concept was what I was working with. And we did the same thing with avocados. We helped bring in jackfruits and different types of bamboos and palms, edible palms, all these different types of, seed and oil producing plants, finding the genetic diversity. And now that was 2001. So that was 23 years ago now. It's a huge food forest down there now. It's one of probably the largest genetic repositories, of many fruits and nuts and other useful species, throughout the tropics and the whole world now. And, Nicaragua has gone through some challenging times yet again in recent years, but it's still a place that people are traveling to. There's actually an upcoming permaculture design course in February at Selva Negra, which is a really cool sort of fair trade organic coffee cooperative in the Highlands. I highly recommend that. It's being taught by Andrew Faust, who's one of friend of mine and someone I think a lot of as a permaculture teacher. So it's a great combination of learning permaculture in an amazing spot and space. So I do encourage people to check out Nicaragua. And I think Project Bona Fide, even though I'm not still in the running of it, I'm connected with it, and you can look up projectbonafide.org on Instagram. And if you're interested to see about going there, maybe doing some volunteering, they have been doing permaculture courses, for most of the years. So definitely, encourage you to check out Nicaragua in general. And then, these permaculture based projects, there are great places to land.
Yeah. I have many best friends from Nicaragua. They talked
Mhm.
about culture, they talk about food, and all forest food and fruit and all these things. And I have never been to Nicaragua, so thank you for sharing so many good things about Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Let me travel you back to US from Nicaragua. So again, when I was watching one of your video about your circular straw bale house,
Hmm.
wow, I was
Yeah.
so fascinated. This is my dream house, by the way, Michael. So can you please tell me a little bit more about it? It's not that you are just talking about it, Many people talk about permaculture and so many theories. You are living it.
Mm.
Not only you're not preaching, but really practicing it. That makes
Yeah.
that makes me really feel wow.
Yeah,
I really
it becomes a way of living. When you get further into, permaculture or other sort of regenerative design ways of it becomes a way you live. You begin to see how things can work together in your life, both in, your economy, where you live, how you're spending your days. It just, once you start to see how all this does work well together, then you just naturally start to move into it, and it becomes, your life. It's very possible, and yeah, it works. It really works well. And I think, my life is a good example of that. Not that it doesn't take a lot of, um, you know, sort of courage, but I mean, I don't really, I say courage, but really it's passion. I'm never really, that's one of the things about me is I'm just like, I'm so excited about doing these things that I'm never really like, oh, I'm worried about something not working. I just really get into it. And since these are a lot of the things that I do have a lot of proven record as well, it's not like some things I'm definitely creating on my own, but a lot of these things, like a straw bale house, straw bale houses work really well in our climate. That's proven. Now what I did was I designed a circular roundwood house, so I added my own elements to it. But I'm working with something that has track record as well. So yeah, our circular straw bale house, we finished building about 7 years ago now, and it's wonderful to live in. It was really cool to build it. It created community. You didn't necessarily need to have a lot of professional building skills. You're working with a lot of natural materials, straw, clay, lime plasters. We have earthen floors, a living roof, compost toilet, gray water systems. In some ways, the whole house is simplified from complexity. Now, you do put a little more extra time and labor in to build these, but you're using materials that are all around us. And that's the difference. There is a difference between natural building and green building. Natural building is working with natural materials. Green building is working with fabricated materials that probably have less impact. And sometimes that's what's realistic in certain environments. But if you do have the opportunity and the space to do a new build, natural building is a wonderful way to go, and it feels good to live in. I mean, our psyche is really shaped by the environment around us, the architecture around us, and you feel that when you're in a natural space like ours, which is circular as well. So your mind moves in different ways. It's able to sort of relax more and flow more rather than sort of be all bouncy and edgy, which is like most of our built environment these days. It's the architecture does affect our psyche. So there you have it.
Wonderful, Michael. Wonderful. As I said, this is my dream project at some point in my life. Um, how would you envision your homestead, your paradise, I would say, after 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, I always do, and that's the trick, especially when you're planting, is to think about the full size of something.
Yeah.
And that's where most people tend to plant things too closely.
Mhm.
So let's say you're going to plant, like a Chinese chestnut tree, which I do recommend. You think about, okay, well, when that gets growing, it's got this beautiful umbrella canopy. It's maybe 30 feet tall and probably a good, almost 30 feet, wide. So you think about that ultimate reach of your branches. You're like, okay, well, let's make sure that I've got some room between my trees as well, because you want good airflow, especially in our part of the world, which is very, very tropical, humid in the summer. We basically have a tropical growing climate here in the summer, which is one of the reasons I love living here. This is one of the best growing climates I've found on the entire planet. It's a really good spot here, the mid-Atlantic. Good rainfall, even seasons, things really grow well. So you think about, but the back, the thing you need to be mindful of that is that it's also very humid, and there's quite a bit of potential disease issues, which is not an issue if you're choosing the right species. Again, really important, especially in our zone. And when you go look at catalogs, they don't tell you. They'll say, "Oh yeah, it's good for zone 5 through 9," but that's probably Washington State. It's not necessarily, Maryland, DC, Virginia, Southern Pennsylvania area we're in, where it's like, well, the disease pressure is just going to crush it. So knowing and filtering, and that's what I do. In my first book, Edible Landscaping with the Permaculture Twist, I have a whole chapter on uncommon fruits that, helps highlight these easy to grow, very delicious characters. And some of my work going forward is going to be expounding on that. I might be doing like a small course on it, and I might be redoing some of the work in that book to expand. because that's where I'm excited, like what, especially now that I've got, another decade of experience, because I trial stuff. So I'll trial, 10 different types of, black currant bushes. I'll trial a bunch of hardy kiwis. I'll trial a bunch of figs. And I was like, okay, well, look, these are the ones that are really thriving, without much input and care in our climate. And our site's quite it's we're in a little holler. We're in like a little riparian creek zone, which is great. There's no, we have windbreaks all around us, but we're very sort of stagnant. So it's a good testing ground for anything that might want to get funky. It's gonna get funky. It's gonna get funky here. So if it does well here, it's probably gonna do well in most regions, areas around us. Um, I forgot what I was even talking about.
You
Oh,
know,
spacing. So yeah, make when you're thinking about your trees, make sure you've got your good spacing. So for Chinese chestnuts, I would do 40-foot spacing, potentially
mm,
50-foot if you have the space. If you're doing small to mid-sized fruit trees, you're looking at, probably an average of 20-foot spacing. Pawpaws, you can plant closer. I would plant them at about 12-foot spacing.
wonderful, wonderful. So, Michael, it seems that we may need to do other episode because so many interesting stuff people can learn from you. So I want to enter to the rapid fire round.
Okay.
Who is Michael Judd in one sentence? It's tricky.
Just another journeying soul, in the 21st century, trying to swim through, all of these new realities.
Wonderful. The most influential person, your role model.
Oh gosh, I've had quite a few.
Maybe one.
Doug Bullock. Yeah, Doug Bullock. Doug Bullock of the Bullock Brothers is a permaculture, amazing teacher and mentor, and he's in Orcas Island in Washington State. Bullock Brothers, Doug Bullock.
Yeah, I also watched about them, and I really loved whatever they have been doing for many, many years. So,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Yes. And one of your favorite book that you would recommend?
Just finished one called the New Wild, by I think Fred Pierce.
Hmm,
Excellent, excellent book. Highly recommend everybody to read that.
fantastic. What is one piece of advice you would give to your 18 years old self?
It's the same thing I'm trying to say to myself now, just to to slow down and sort of listen to what's happening, versus sort of always being, thinking, 3, 4 steps down the road.
Wonderful.
Be more with what's actually going on.
Perfect. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone starting out in his or her career?
Career, like any kind of career, life
I mean,
career, or anything, huh?
yeah, anything pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, geez. Learn about how to regulate your system, your
Mm,
internal system. Learn about what being, self-regulated means. Because no matter what you're doing, if you don't have your own internal self-regulation, you're going to just be whipping all around the place and get caught up in a lot of things that don't have a lot of truth to you. So, learning about self-regulation.
mm. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Nut trees.
Wow, powerful. One thing you would really change if you had a magic wand.
I would paint, nut trees over all of these corn and soybean fields.
Ooh. One thing, Michael, you enjoy most.
What do I enjoy most? Playing with my kids, working in the food forest, plants,
Yeah.
family and plants.
Yeah, same thing with me. What a alignment
It's
I
good.
feel,
It's good. It's called good karma, man.
Yes, when I'm bored, I don't get bored easily.
Yeah.
But if I'm little sort of out of the order to some extent, my wife says, when you find plant, you are fine.
Yes.
These are jokes.
Yeah.
You even don't need me.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Good. Good. Good for her. Good for you.
yeah. The same thing with my family. I have three children, and then I also
Wow.
enjoy. Yeah, yeah,
Well, you need the grounding too. I
yeah,
mean, raising kids is crazy.
yeah. Any message to humanity?
Message humanity. Plant nut trees.
Perfect. Perfect. So, Michael, how can people find you and how can they buy your books? And let's say if you people want to come to your homestay, if they can stay there, or please tell a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so you can check my website,
Hmm.
ecologia.com is a good landing spot. There you'll find links to my YouTube channel. On Instagram, I'm at Permaculture Ninja. Facebook pages are all there. A lot of information to learn from. Links to my books are all there. Best way to come and experience what we're doing is to come to one of the events we do during the year.
Okay.
The PawPaw Festival is the big one. That's in September, typically the third Saturday in September. And it's an opportunity. We do not workshops, we do tours and talks throughout the day, food forest tours. So it's not just PawPaws, it's PawPaws and permaculture. And
Mm,
it's at our homestead. You get to see our home, you get to see the way we're living and doing things. So, and enjoy PawPaws and music and fun for kids, everybody. It's a hoot. Then I usually do a couple of workshops a year. Usually I do a mushroom growing workshop in the spring and the fall. And I'll often do a early summer, sort of food forest and house tour. So
mm.
those are really, really the only options. Sometimes I also around April, I have a small nursery. So on Saturdays, I'll do a limited amount of hours. People can come and walk around a bit, and if they want plants, plants. Otherwise, we don't really have sort of a revolving door, so to say. Life's pretty nice and full. So I like to share through those events and then through the materials that I'm able to create and share digitally. I've created two online courses. One's on pawpaws and the other's on growing mushrooms. So I'm going to continue adding to that material. So my books, my courses, my YouTube channel, I'm sharing a lot of what I'm learning. Just yeah, finding those ways.
Is it okay if I post your website link
Oh
in
yeah,
the
please.
description? Okay.
Yeah,
I
anything
think
you'd like.
some people might
Yeah.
be interested in knowing more about it and maybe purchasing your books and courses.
Well, just come have a look and you can see our pictures of our house and things like that we've talked about, give some visual reference to some of the things, that we've shared here.
Yeah. So thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for your wonderful insight. I would be happy to learn more about you maybe in next episode. I had many other questions which I could not ask, but hopefully in the next
Yeah.
episode.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Good planting.
Thank you.